They're here at Honeybook. What? Oh, last name is pronounced Daniel. For those of you who do not know, it's not Dagenalt. And I know it's killing everyone. And this here is Tomas.
Hi, hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. More importantly, I think more food has arrived to me, and I think the food is there. Don't miss it.
Yeah, don't be shy. Go grab food while we're talking. It's lunchtime. Cool. Well, today, yes. Oh, sorry. I'll hold it closer. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't speak up.
All right. Cool. Well, today we're doing a fireside chat with Tomas. And yeah, we're going to learn all about his background. We're very excited. So we'll just kind of dive right into it. You have a very impressive career history, but recently you joined Honeybook. What does it mean to be head of product at Honeybook?
I love this question. So, first of all, I'm super excited to be here. So, what does a head of product do? Let's start with that. Head of product runs the product organization. Some companies call that chief product officer if they want to be super corporate. Basically, it is a job that comes with like great responsibility and with like a great obsession with user success. So what does it mean? It's like here it means really work with the teams, with ProDev as we call it, with everyone on product and in engineering to really achieve that user success. And it's about improving product, also having a vision for the product itself. So some call the head of product the vision bearer. It's a very cross-functional role, and it's a role that works with all other teams in the company to really hold things together and to really understand how can we create the best product for our users now and in the future. So it's also a very forward-looking strategic role as well.
Great. Well, we're very excited that you joined Honeybook. But let's take a look back in your career, all the way back to your childhood. Did you have any interests in your childhood that later aligned with your career and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I was a very curious child when I grew up. I was always trying to understand how things work and what kind of an impact they have on people. So I would be disassembling a radio and like also one main thing was that which I didn't tell you before. My uncle told me that little people live in TV sets, so they put on a show for you, and I actually tried to open that, but I couldn't quite get that. But I was always interested in. I was really curious. I had like a very strong sense of imagination. In fact, so much so that my teacher, when I was in fourth grade, had to give a recommendation to my parents which school I would go to. The school system is slightly different. We have college as like the top school that you go to if you want to, high school, of course, as a school that you go to if you want to go to college at some point. But there are also other schools if you don't want to go to college, if you just want to get like vocational training, like more blue collar jobs, and you don't go to college, you go to like a lower school level. And my teacher wasn't quite sure what she could recommend because I was the top student. What she was really concerned about was I had a super high, for her, like too high level of imagination. So I was a dreamer in a way, and I always like came up with new ideas and probably a little bit too much for the German school system. They didn't know how to handle me in a way. I had like amazing grades, all straight A's, but they I didn't fit into the box in a way, which was interesting. The other thing I can say that is something that in a way kind of helped me be a good product manager and a product leader later on is I had a stronger than normal obsession with music. Live music. I did not have a lot of access to live music where we lived in like a super suburban part of a small town in Germany. And for me, it was like the fascinating thing I think was observing that music has a profound impact on everyone around me. So it's something that touches everyone here and everyone everywhere. And I was just really fascinated by something that can be creative that has an impact on people around me, which is a theme that followed me through my career, creating impact, creating a change, creating something that is dramatically different in users is something that I loved as a product manager and a product leader.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and I know you mentioned the schooling system's a little different, but he ended up going to college. And while you were in college, you interned at IBM. How did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, I did, and that was in Berlin, and that was the only tech company around there. They had a lot of service companies, and that was the only tech company, and a very big one, as you can imagine. I was young and dumb and broke, um, and also didn't know anything. And I thought, okay, it's the only tech company, and I need a job there. So I walked in there and I said, you need to hire me. Um, and so they actually interviewed me, and I did my homework and prepared for what IBM does, where they're coming from, and how I could help. At the time, I really had no clue. I was just starting as a student and really did not really know what my value would be. But I guess my like self-esteem and my like attitude helped there a little bit, open some doors. And I started off as an intern engineer, as a software engineer. I had basically written some code on the side, self-taught, but I wasn't a good engineer. And they hired me as an intern initially to learn how to code. Um, to my like biggest shocking surprise, the code that I wrote was shipped to actual customers 2 weeks later, and it was probably pretty awful code. So I was like, yes.
What language?
Oh, what language? The question was what language? Well, it was a database language that is not used anymore. It was just a step up of like punch cards. So I programmed a system called like it was like a system that actually is still used by Costco, believe it or not, because I went to Costco the other day and I saw code that I wrote like decades ago that they're still running for like accounting purposes, which was scary and exciting to me at the same time. So it's this like really terminal looking screens with like green letters on like black. So that was then, and then shortly after I chose to do more to work more in. So this language is close to like the closest to like a database language or assembler, if you wish. But then later on, I chose Prolog or ProTOS, as it was called at IBM, which is an AI-based language. It was fun. The main thing for me there was I went from like being an intern to being hired full time and almost doing college on the side. And I went there from knowing nothing much to really utilizing all that IBM had to offer. IBM, of course, is like a huge corporation. And to me, like being early in my career at the time, startups weren't a thing really, was really beneficial because I had more senior people to learn from. They had like programs that I could join. They had a lot of documentation that I could read, and so that helped me really get a quick start all the way to the point when that was in Berlin, in Germany, and then in Berlin, so Berlin was putting out a bid for hosting the Olympic Games in the year 2000. So it was a few years prior when I started my job there. And I ended up being the representative of IBM for that event. Well, history showed that Berlin never won the bid, but at the time, a few years prior, that was a big deal because the hosting cities were competing. And in my role, like coming from this internship, I suddenly was the representative of IBM, which basically meant that I was there to define the vision for technology that would be used at the Olympic Games like 8 years into the future, which was mind blowing and a lot of pressure and also a great opportunity for me to figure out, oh, are we going to have like glass fiber cable in reporter booths, and are journalists going to use mobile devices to be on the field to report, which at the time again was very sci-fi. I was watching a lot of like Star Trek episodes.
What was your biggest learning from IBM?
My biggest learning was basically to follow my passion. It was all about, and initially I thought there was one thing that I thought I was good at, which was engineering, and I really wasn't that great at. I was interested at understanding how things work, and also what that does to users who use those products. So that was like an insight that I gained over time to realize I was probably an okay engineer, but I was much better in actually working like leading teams, even at an early stage, of getting people together, coordinating, and then really getting to the core of what are their unmet needs or desires. So it was really like an early lesson in user research and understanding, like building empathy with the user, which is what product is mostly about. And I learned that on the job. by really sucking at coding in a way, but then realizing there's something valuable in what I do, which is why they wanted to keep me there. And then realizing, oh, that really maps nicely to user needs.
Awesome. So inspiring. After IBM, you went to SAP. How was your experience there?
Yeah, so for me, if you look at my professional career that developed from like very large company initially, IBM, to smaller and smaller companies, and I think that has something to do with my confidence level and with my professional experience. Because initially I really benefited from this like big structure of a corporation, but then over time I realized, oh, I've got this. Now I want more responsibility. I want more challenges. I want to have more impact. When I realized at IBM, I was like a tiny little, you know, Oscar still uses it, but other people probably I didn't make a dent really. Whereas with like smaller companies, I felt like, oh, I can like really run a whole area and I can really create bigger impact for more people. And SAP at the time was very small, at just a couple of thousand people worldwide when I joined. And it was very like the closest to a startup that you could imagine that I worked for at the time. So everything was still like very ad hoc and improvised and highly iterative. And coming in at this early stage was really exciting to me because I could lay some foundation for the company later on. I ended up being with SAP for 11 years, found my way from being hired as an engineer to switching over to product when I realized I was basically an underperforming engineer, but the company saw value in what I was doing. And when I thought I was being fired for not writing enough code, I was actually being promoted into a role that didn't have a name, which then suddenly had a name in product. It did not have product management at the time. And throughout my career there, 11 years at SAP, the company grew from just under 2,000 worldwide to about 70,000 worldwide. And I switched from engineering to product and then ran corporate strategy with the executive team and the CEO for 3 years toward the end of my tenure there to then really understand how can like one of the biggest software companies in like the business space, how can they like win the space and cater better to their users and try the dark side, the strategy side of things.
What was it like seeing the company transform from a couple thousand to over 70,000 people worldwide? What was that like?
It was insane. It was good and bad. I mean, good is yay growth and company growth and success. On the other hand, really seeing over like the course of 11 years how specifically that company turned from like a startup-y, like really fun company to work for into a big corporation that became somewhat anonymous. And when I woke up one day and I realized, oh, this is too big now. And it didn't feel like the company that I had joined. Just for comparison, later on I worked for Google, and Google preserved this like small company feel much longer than SAP did. Funny enough, SAP at some point when they had crossed like the 30,000 employee mark, there was this whole initiative when we thought, oh, we need like a process to go faster or to align different teams, where before it was the Wild West. And ironically, the process was called PIL, the Product Innovation Lifecycle, which killed all innovation like right there, because it was so prescriptive and it just really set some like behavior and some process in stone that people followed too literally, and that essentially just killed all innovation in the company. And so a couple of years later, I realized still a good company in this like corporate space, but not really my place for creating a bigger impact for users and for using my creativity, my like too much imagination, as my grade school teacher would say.
Awesome. From SAP, you traveled across the world and ended up at Google. What was it like moving to a different continent, different tech company, and starting there?
Well, that was 12 years ago. 12 years, I was hoping that I could get rid of that German accent. Well, here I am, still there. It was a crazy culture shock, mostly because, so at SAP is like a big business B2B company. So they work with like the Fortune 500 companies and run their businesses. And it's not sexy in any way, but it's like a necessary tool that many companies use. And you have to know this has to be like really solid. Their clients are like Chevron and like big companies, Coca-Cola, big consumer companies, and most big companies, most corporations, the world use SAP systems across all their operations, like finance, and material management and production planning and so on. So that's what the system is good at. And so at SAP, we had major releases about once every 2 years. So planning cycles and release cycles were 2 years. Planning, testing, research. So we did that really thoroughly and then launched a new release. At Google, we had about seven major releases on a single day. Because there are just so many different products, and that to me was just like shocking to say like, oh, we have basically 5 minutes for user research. On the flip side, though, it was also really cool to like launch into like running product at Google, where they have just like I did something like very visible on the Google homepage, like I created some innovation there, and that page gets, or at the time, got 1.6 billion page views on a single day. So if you want to run an A/B experiment, you can turn it on for a few seconds and you can turn it off, and you have significance right there, which is amazing. Right, Eddie? He's gasping for that. It's just like, just take it all in, a few seconds, you turn it on, turn it off. Okay, for us it takes a couple of minutes. So that was the major difference, and like a whole different culture. And as I said earlier, for Google, it's also interesting how the same role is very different for different companies. When you ask you, what do I do as a head of product at HoneyBook? It's a very valid question, because product management, product leadership is different company by company, and at Google it's also very different. Depending on, some companies include marketing and sales in that role, and other companies don't. For some companies, it's a very, very technical role, a very technical background, which is awesome. For some companies, it's not at all. It's like really much closer to sales and marketing channel. So for Google, it was a very technical role that required like very close collaboration with engineers, which was super awesome.
Great. From Google, you went to Mozilla. Can you share why you only spent 11 months at Mozilla?
Oh, yes. Yes. So Mozilla, I worked for Google for 5 years, had a good run. Again, if you want to see a pattern there, the company grew from just about 2,000 people worldwide to about 65,000 in 5 years. SAP took 11 years to get there. So it was, again, like major growth, and one day I felt like, oh, Google is awesome, I could still be there, but I felt like I'm on autopilot. I can do that in my sleep. I really want bigger challenges. So before I was even ready to leave, you know how some recruiters have a sense for someone who might be ready for the next thing. So someone reached out from Mozilla, and what I didn't know at the time was that Mozilla was open source and nonprofit. I knew them as like, oh, they did like Firefox, and they're like a good-ish company. But I was immediately intrigued, because I felt like, oh, finding a company in the tech space that is well known and has like a good reputation and is open source and nonprofit immediately got my attention. So that's why, and then I met people there and I felt like super excited. I still think it's a great company. It's good to have Mozilla out there. They've done like great things. It's just that the browser wars are over. There's nothing to win in like browser space for me. And then I realized the good about Mozilla is that they have such a strong community, and they have like a ton of people worldwide helping out with their code base and everything, which is fascinating. The bad thing about that is that, for example, Firefox 4.0 was delayed by about 3 months because a 14-year-old in France decided to go on vacation and not merge his code into the main branch. So we like got delayed by 3 months because of a teenage engineer in France. Which is awesome in a way, but it's also scary. Yeah, and to me that was like both inspiring and exciting, and also you cannot build professional products that way. It's like it's impossible. Like unfortunately, like so many like .orgs or like so many nonprofits, they have amazing ones, but Mozilla is like ridiculously disorganized and dysfunctional when it comes to producing professional products. So I realized very early on, this is not a good use of my talent and of my work. So I decided to stay there for just under a year to help them launch Firefox for Android, and also set the path for Firefox. I was the head of mobile there, and also launched Firefox for iOS internally, and it took them about 3 years to launch it publicly for a number of reasons. I just felt like it was not a good use. It's like they were not on a good path for product innovation where I felt like I can create the biggest impact. Still a good company, very community driven, not the right place for me. So I noticed that really early on, but I felt like, oh, it's, it wasn't anything horrible. I just felt like it didn't go as fast as I wanted to go.
Totally. And then from there, you went to Twitter, another impressive company.
Yeah.
What are some takeaways from Twitter?
Twitter. So Twitter basically for me was interesting because I got hired by all my former Google employees who had in the meantime moved over to Twitter. So this was mostly a personal decision to say like, okay, Twitter is kind of struggling because they're trying to figure out what the hell it is they want to be when they grow up, which they're still trying to figure out. And particularly at the time, I had like some really, really awesome people that I knew that I worked with at Google that I was going to join at Twitter to really change that and to challenge the company and to bring in some innovation and to take some bold moves, which was cool, and we did to some extent. The truth about Twitter, though, is through their like ever-changing leadership, there were like different CEOs and different founders came and went and then took advisor roles. There's just such a lot of movement going on all the time, which really took its toll in the company being really laser focused on like user success. The company, they're growing, it's fine, but it's like again, the biggest challenge there is like very inconsistent leadership. If you compare Google, for example, Sergey and Larry are great. They're nerds, they're engineers. That's why Google's DNA is like an engineering DNA. But they've been consistent leaders. And now with Sundar, he has been like on the team for a long time. I worked with him on the product team when I worked there. Great guy. And even Eric Schmidt, when they brought him in as a CEO, it was like great consistent leadership, and Twitter has not had that. And you could really feel Jack is awesome. I work with him directly, but even this whole setup, it's like I can't really name like any major innovation that Twitter has launched in like the past 3 years. They tried with like the whole live video and lost that face to Facebook, and it's again like big potential, but not knowing where to go.
This whole time you've been wanting to start your own company,
Yes.
but Airbnb managed to grab you. What was your experience like at Airbnb while in the back of your head knowing you've been trying to start a company?
Yeah, I originally came to this country thinking I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to start my own company. That was the whole plan. And then Google like picked me up and said, no, work for us first. And then Mozilla twisted my arm ever so gently, and then Twitter as well. When I left Twitter, I was ready to go. I had already been an advisor and mentor to entrepreneurs, some startups, accelerators here in the US and Germany. I was the first product advisor to SoundCloud. So a couple of really good companies that I work with. And I was ready to go when Brian reached out and said, you have to work for us at Airbnb. And I said, great, tell me more. I was originally not that excited because when they first reached out, the company was much smaller, and I thought, I'm not interested in this, like, I have an extra room, who wants to stay on my couch kind of thing. I honestly did not, I thought, is this like a dating app in disguise, kind of, which would have made it more interesting. But I felt like, it's not I'm not excited about that until I suddenly realized, oh, the sharing economy, this is the thing. And I got really excited about, oh, this is not really about people, or it's about people making money off extra space, but it's really about connecting people worldwide, which is what I ended up doing. So the selling point there was, okay, I'll do that for a year, which is the agreement that I had, and I'll help you over this hump. I was the head of international product at Airbnb, and help you figure out how to grow the two-sided marketplace across 192 countries and build a product that works for users in Japan and in China and in Russia and everywhere they are. And that's what I did. And that was actually really exciting. And then like just past the 1 year mark, I said, okay, now or never, I have to do this. I have to just do my own thing, which is what I did.
Awesome. And why did you start Savvy? Savvy is Tomas's company, for those who don't know.
So Savvy is basically Airbnb for learning. It's a platform where teachers and learners can meet for one-to-one learning sessions over web-based video. So you have a talent, you have some skills, some expertise. It takes you a couple of minutes to create a profile, to set your price, to connect with your Google Calendar, and you're in business. You get like a vanity URL that you can promote yourself with, and then people basically makes anyone with expertise bookable instantly, and everything, booking, payment, and the actual session is handled by us or like automatically in directly in the browser, nothing to install. So that was like my 30-second investment pitch. So I did that because I realized I'm obsessed with learning, and I like teaching as well, but I'm like, I like absorbing, and I like just having a profound impact on people's lives. And as such, I realized there are a couple of areas that I see that are ripe for innovation and that also have a profound impact on people's lives, which is healthcare, finance, and education. They're all like regulated, and it's like really hard to innovate in those because there's so much regulation. It's very different in different countries, and yet there's such a big need for that. So I decided to go into learning because I felt I can create a platform that connects people for teaching and learning anywhere in the world, and to tap into this unused resource. Because right now, if you want to be a teacher, you have the skill. The bar is really high, and the gold standard right now is to create content. And most learning is based on content today. Um, in fact, it's a huge market, and most online learning is actually goes toward content. If you look at online learning systems, Udemy, Udacity, Skillshare, Code Academy, and so on, it's mostly consuming pre-recorded content. And that is just, that bores everyone into a coma. In fact, about 6.7% of people who start an online class finish it, and I'm one of the ones that does it. So over 93%. Just, it's not personal enough, it's not customized enough. I wanted to change that to connect people one-on-one. That's why I started.
What was it like initially starting it, the early days?
It was exciting and incredibly hard. It was such a big difference going from being a startup advisor to being in the driver's seat and suddenly having to do everything. The interesting thing, of course, I wasn't, so I'm super excited about the idea, and I was excited about starting a company based on my vision and finding a great co-founder and hiring a team with a team of 9 people, and really starting to work on an idea that I had and seeing how it develops. That was super exciting. The hard part was what I underestimated was what it's like to be a CEO. It's like, it's much harder than I thought it is, especially since it taps into so many things that I'm not good at. And in fact, I realized really working with like the things I'm not good at and really stretching myself and learning every day is a thing. And I think I've never learned more than in these days or at this time. When someone asks me like, what is it like to be the CEO of your own company? I said, well, I do everything from negotiating, like getting investors in and negotiating legal contracts with the people who give us the money, all the way to scraping moldy food off the office refrigerator because everyone else is too busy. So it's this whole bandwidth. And the moldy food was not necessarily the worst part of my job. Sometimes really talking to 400 investors that takes up all your time, where you can't build product. That was like probably the most significant insight to say, oh wait, like I'm creating this company, but I actually don't get to build this product. I get to hire people who build this product. That was an interesting insight that wasn't that clear to me at the beginning, and also some part of frustration. Overall, an amazing journey and a great adventure. It's very different from what I had expected, and in a way, like an amazing learning opportunity. So I would never want to miss it.
Awesome. There's been a few books that have helped you throughout your career. Do you want to shed some light on those and give us any Kindle recommendations?
Yes, so one is a very old one. It's The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. So I personally like design books, and mostly because they are like, oftentimes they are user insights in a nutshell. And they look at, and I'm not necessarily talking about just visual design books. There's a great book about service design, which I could recommend. Alan Cooper has done a lot of great research. I work a bit with IDEO, and they have like great publications as well. But what I like is whenever someone like analyzes user behavior or what resonates with different types of humans or different types of users, I find that incredibly insightful. Why are things designed the way they are designed? And many things are not really designed very well. Why do I have a door handle that invites me to pull on this door out there, when all I have to do is push. So I have to read, and it's like very counterintuitive. So we see this like every day around us. And the inmates are running the asylum is actually a somewhat old, but still interesting collection of design ideas and thoughts and examples of product design gone wrong and gone well. There are more modern books and more books that are much more into like service design and modern web design. But this one I like because it's an easy read. It has some fun anecdotes, and it makes you think of like everything around you, and also think about how, like, for me, it's all about putting yourself in the shoes of the user. That's what IDEO as a company is doing really well. Like, how do you like take their position, developing empathy, and that's what we do as a product team as well, to understand what a user's unmet needs and desires are. So in other words, to understand what they need, which can be very different from what they ask for, and that's what this book is about.
Awesome. And do you have any advice you would give to your younger career self that you wish you would have known back in your IBM days? Well,
Yeah, I don't like giving advice, not even to myself, but if I had to, let's see. Basically, focus on what I'm really good at without worrying too much about the things that I like. Strengthen my strengths in a way, and really focusing on what I'm excited about and what resonates with me. When I tried to be a good engineer, that just wasn't a good fit, and it was like it took me a while because I felt like, oh man, this is like I can totally be good at this, and I was okay at this. And looking back, I would say it's okay not to be great at this one thing if there are other things that you're really good at and that you're really excited about. And that's probably, looking back, the career advice that I would give myself, to like stop trying too hard to be like a superstar engineer, and really leave that up to people who are just much better than I am at it, and recognizing that there are other things that I like and I'm good at.
awesome. And I know you don't like giving advice, but any advice to people here that are early on in their career?
So for me, it's, again, just building off what I just said, I guess is, yeah, focus on what you're passionate for. And my advice, just because I'm super biased toward product, is put yourself in the shoes of our users. Like, develop this muscle of empathy. This is good, like across the company, across different teams. It's always good in some functions and some roles. Some people here like talk to members every day, and others don't. So for me, it's about like really trying to understand, what does the florist do? How does a caterer like go through their day? What do they want to achieve? What is the DJ? How are they interacting with our products? And really like strengthening that muscle every day, and being good at this, no matter which role you have, which function you have. We're all working together and in different roles on making this a huge success with all those different users. And it's also fun to understand what are people struggling with. Like, the MX team can tell those stories like every day, or what does sales have to explain over and over again. So that's what we are improving from the product side, but also it's cool to understand, what are they even trying to achieve? Who are those people, and why are they doing what they do? What are they passionate about? And that, to me, gets me excited every day.
Awesome. Anyone have questions? We're going to open it up to the crowd.
Ian.
So over your rich and illustrious career, what product feature or accomplishment are you most proud of?
So the question was, over my amazing career, you said something else. What illustrious? I don't even know what to say. What product or feature am I most proud of? So there are a couple that I like. So first of all, I want to say the company that I created prior to joining Honeybook, of course, because it was my thing. Also had some like great things that teachers and learners loved. Here's an interesting one I did at Google, which was both universally hated by a lot of users, and yet was incredibly successful. And I like it because it was one of the most challenging project management tasks that I did. So at one point, my boss at Google was Marissa Meyer, and she said, what can we do to get more people to set Google as people's homepage? At the time, browsers were still a thing. Mobile wasn't, the dominant way into searches. So what can we do to have people set google.com or whichever country version as your browser homepage? Because it showed that If that's your homepage, obviously searches go up. So it was all about search volume. So if it's not your homepage, if something else is your homepage, you have to go to Google first. And again, now, of course, you do it via browser URL bar or on mobile. That's a big thing. So Marissa said, what can we do? And I did some research and I realized, well, what people like more than anything is personalization. So if you gave them some options for personalization, something they want to look at, other than the Google logo and the pristine white, that could be a winner. So ran some experiments. And so the winning suggestion was, let's give them the ability to replace the all-white Google background with their own picture. Not just a picture from a gallery, but a picture that they can upload from their dog, their kids, their whatever. And that was crazy because it was the first time Google was not shown as like an all white with like just a few words and very like Google logo focused site, but which actually had people's pictures in the background. It was a very challenging feature to build because I had to work with all organizations inside Google since we had to do that without slowing down time to search, which is measured in like microseconds almost to figure out like how long does it take from typing in google.com to actually being able to search in the search box. It's time. So if you spend like 5 milliseconds more for loading even some JavaScript or for like lazy loading some more JavaScript after the search box is there, that might be outside the budget. So a couple of things happened. We launched this. So many people got excited about it that they tweeted about it, and I fail whale Twitter. Anyone remember fail whale on Twitter? So there was one of those days when everyone was talking about this. It was also the first time in my career that I did not have to explain to my parents what it is that I do for a living, because they heard it in the news. So that was fun. It was also, I got so much hate mail about how dare you touch our like pristine white background. And I'm saying that as a background, as an example of like, it's like a wallpaper feature, which seems like seemingly innocent and like, what's the big deal? It did actually create such a big bump in searches that I almost melted down one of the Google data centers and had to provision more servers because it was such a big success from the company. It had many haters and also many more people that actually loved the feature. It didn't do anything useful other than driving more search to Google servers, which was mission accomplished. Yes.
As head of product, you have a lot of like designers and project managers under you that are all have their own creative visions and own visions for the product. How do you manage them so everyone, the whole company is aligned towards singular product vision?
Great. So the question was, as a head of product, you have a lot of different like designers and product leads under you that all have their own creative ideas and vision. How do you actually align them to create something consistent within the company? So typically companies have a creative process and they also have like a process of defining their standards. So you define the brand standards, like we have our branding and we also have like our definition of standards for our UI elements. So we have Lorenzo and other designers who contributed to the defaults here. And we have like a library that everyone can use on the engineering team. So that not everyone who creates a button like designs that like with round edges or square edges or with like the 45-degree drop shadow or something else. So you define standards. But then there are those cases when you have to define a new product feature and an entirely new thing. What you typically do is you base that based on user research, informed by standards, and that usually informs a decision across the company. So this is how we align, and it's actually good to have diversity of opinions. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're on brand and that you're adhering to the style guides that we have in the company, so everything is really consistent from a usability perspective. Of course, you have quality checks of people to look at this to make sure this is actually the case before it goes out, or sometimes after it goes out, and we fix it. In rare cases, the head of product can be the tiebreaker. If there's just like two different camps and there's just no data or no other evidence to really figure out should we do A or B, which should be the case very rarely, but in some cases, like every manager can be a tiebreaker in that sense to say, okay, let's go with A and here's why. But we are actually, I have to say, I'm impressed to see just how we have those style guides and we have those templates in place. So this is not a standard for companies our size. I'm like very impressed with that. And that gives us just a head start on, yes, big shout out, I agree. That gives us a head start on really creating a beautiful product that is consistent across different channels, across different features, across mobile and web and mobile app. So we're actually much better than most companies of our size that I know out there, where it's really like an opinion battle, and you can very clearly see where teams are not aligned. Even at Airbnb, I have to say. I mean, now it's gone, but in the old design, two fun facts is one is no one owned the homepage of Airbnb. Airbnb.com was like fell between the cracks. Yeah, I would say what? It was such an iconic like new standard setting, like big image with like big search box in the middle, and everyone copied it. No one owned this. It was designed by someone, of course, but then the other thing is there were actually two search bars that did exactly the same thing, one in the middle of the screen and one in the header, because there were two different teams working on it. One was the header team, that was everywhere, and one was the other team. And they did the same thing, but said different things. And they said, one said, where are you going? And the other one said, where do you want to go? Which seems like a subtle difference. If you translate that into like 45 languages, the concept of where are you going and where do you want to go is very different. And confuses people more than you might think, like where do I put my search in? And it took just about 3 years to resolve that issue with the new design. So just saying that even like companies that are glorified for their like great design have those issues, and I actually think we are ahead of the curve by just having those libraries and everything and standards early on. Yes.
There
So,
is.
you said your love for music and how it brings people together. So one, do you ever play DJ on Sonos? And two, what are you listening to right now?
So question was my love for music. Question one or A was, do I ever play music on Sonos? And B, what I'm currently listening to. So yes, I do play DJ on Sonos, mostly early on when I come into the office, when everyone has to stamp my music choices. It's mostly something really electronic, and depending on the mood, something techno, house, deep house. And I'm currently listening to John Digweed. He has an awesome, I think, weekly show on Mixcloud. This is show number 693 or something. So he has done this forever, and he just plays amazing sets that I can listen to without end. It depends on the mood. If, like sometimes I put my headphones on, and if I have to crunch numbers for our strategy for next year, it's like I have to put on music that helps me like create the like crunch numbers, which is different from the like, oh, let's be inspired for new ideas. So you'll notice, probably not as noticeable as Chris when he takes over songs, but I like his music choices.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Tomas. This was amazing learning about your background, and I know we all appreciated it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.